Well, that's a good start to this scouting that I'm doing this afternoon. It's actually October 1st, so opening day of bow season here in Iowa. I've been out scouting for the last 3 days or so. Just got back from Missouri hunting with Warb and Hayden. They both shot does down there. After that, I came back to the house and I've been scouting around on some different pieces of public. The first night I went out scouting, I actually just drove around a bunch of different pieces of public and ended up spotting a pretty nice buck not too far from the road. He was up feeding around with a spike, and I'm pretty sure he was eating on pin oak acorns. And then the next night was actually last night, and I went out to a spot where I knew I could see quite a ways into a bunch of big bedding cover, and I just was standing on top of my car, and I ended up spotting 2 other nice bucks. Those bucks actually came up out of a bottom real close to a big water source, and that seems to be the main things that we're looking for right now is acorns and water. That's what we focused on in Missouri and how we found deer, and then that's what I've been seeing these deer on the last couple days here. So that's what brought me to this spot, is there's tons of oaks and lots of creeks that run through this piece. So my plan is just to work my way back in here, looking for sign and see what I can come up with. It's like 91 degrees for a high today. That's part of the reason we're not hunting yet, is just because the weather is not ideal. So I figure we're better off just taking the time to get out here and scout a bunch of areas while it's hot. And then later this week, it looks like we have some cooler weather moving in. So we'll just take a walk up through this piece and see what we can come up with. I'm back out scouting this morning. I'm actually on the other side of where I scouted last night. This creek is a good way to figure out whether or not there's been people in and out of here hunting. With this sandy bottom that's in here, you can see boot tracks if anybody's been in here. And I haven't seen any boot tracks so far. One thing that's a little concerning is we thought there'd be water in this creek, but so far I've only seen one little puddle of water, and that was back that way a little ways. A lot of deer tracks coming through that little puddle. Other than that, there's pretty much no water in this creek so far. I'm gonna just keep creeping my way down through here, looking for water, and see what we come up with. see that? I just jumped a really nice buck. He was laying right here in this downfall in this creek. When he jumped up, he was only probably 5 yards from me. Probably could have killed him if I had my bow. Somebody run this camera. Usually when we're in this spot, they don't bend this creek from what I remember. Usually they're up on top and you can walk this. That's why this creek is nice to access, because most times they're not laying down in this thing, but he was laying right there. He had no idea what was going on because I was going real slow. And in this sand I can be really quiet, especially by myself. The wind's out of the south today, which is in my face. So he jumped up right here, real close to me, but then he ran out there, like I said, only 20 yards or so and stopped. Before he stopped and looked, I ducked down behind all this cover right here. That's why when I first started filming him, he was through the weeds. Then he took off running, so I stood up above him, and he still didn't know what was going on. He stood there for probably 5 or 6 minutes. All right, it's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and yesterday morning is when I jumped that buck out of the creek bed. And I decided not to go in there last night just because it was super hot out and there was no wind to speak of at all. So I was afraid if I got set up in there on that creek, the thermals were just going to pull down into that bottom and probably blow everything out. And if one did come in, I wouldn't have any wind cover to draw my bow. So decided to wait till today because I was looking at the forecast and it showed that it was going to be like 13 to 15 mile an hour winds today, which are finally starting to pick up here. Tonight's the night to go in there, I think, and go after him. It's still pretty warm out, but we've got a front coming in this weekend, and the temperatures are supposed to drop a bunch on Thursday and Friday. Today's Tuesday, and we got the wind cover going for us. And I think it's kind of good that it's hot because there's only like one puddle of water in that whole creek that I saw as I was scouting my way through there. And I think there's a really good chance that him or another buck comes to get a drink out of that thing. I'm here by myself for this afternoon and then all day tomorrow, and I think Nick is going to roll in tomorrow night sometime. So should have some really good days of hunting coming up here. But let's run in the house here, and I'm going to show you guys something. Don't mind the mess over here. Got my little computer editing station right there. If we come out here into Cole's bedroom and look out this window, there's a trail camera set up right there on that tree. We got a little water hole out there. We put it in this summer. But this morning, there was a little buck on there. We have mostly been getting pictures of like does and fawns and stuff. But this morning, there was a decent little buck standing there getting a drink of water. That's good. Maybe the bucks will be up moving a little bit better tonight with this wind. We'll find out. The first plan that I had did not go as planned. I got to the parking lot around 3 o'clock and there was a guy parked there. And that area that I was going to hunt is a huge block of public, so I decided to walk in there anyway where I was planning on going, and he was sitting in his blind in there. So I just turned around, went back out to the car, and I came over to this other spot that I scouted the other day. There's a bunch of rubs up here in this CRP field, and then it goes back into some woods back here. But there's a pond back in here, and that's where I'm assuming most of the deer are hanging out at, just because there's not much water around this year. It's super dry. So I'm going to put my stuff on and start working my way back in there and see what I can come up with. There's a ton of tracks on this pond right here, but I haven't seen any scrapes or rubs over here. All the rubs that I found the other day were back that way about 200 yards probably, but there's tons of tracks in here, so I don't think there's any other water source around other than this thing. Might ought to just set this, but I'd feel better about it if I found a scrape or something. I thought about scouting down through these woods, but that buck that I bumped yesterday morning was real close to a water source, and that was the only water that was around that I know of. There wasn't a ton of buck sign in there. Lots of tracks around that water, and that buck was maybe 150 yards from it, so there's not a ton of buck sign right here, but like I said, I found buck sign not terribly far that direction yesterday. Decided just to stop here and sit it It's only October 3rd, so probably hasn't been too many people out here walking around, bumping deer around. Maybe a big old buck will come up here and get thirsty. So far, ever since that first doe showed up, it's been one after the other. That Spike came in from kind of the direction that I walked. He must have been bedded out there in that CRP field. Didn't hear me come in. They're definitely all coming in here to get to this water, getting a drink, and then going back out into the woods. That Spike came in, he was at like 10 yards right below me here. Now I got my bow in my hand because if that was a big one, I'd have been in a tight spot. Just got back to the car and actually had a better sit than what I was expecting to have. Decent buck right there at the end. He was looking back into the woods, so I thought maybe something else was going to come out, but nothing else ever showed up. He came by and worked off. One thing that I was thinking about when I was sitting up there is both the bucks that I saw were on my side of the pond and all the does stayed on the other side. I just left everything in there in the tree and came back out to the car, and I'll be back in there in the morning. But with the warm weather, they're definitely coming to the water, so get back in there in the morning and see what comes by.